A very good day to you. This Sunday morning brunch blog is in response to yet another question from an ASPW experience member asking about the using of differential locks. Now, I did want to mention now, before we get into this, is that all of this 4x4 stuff, I first wrote my first book called Complete Guide to Four-Wheel Drive in 1993. It's now in its 9th edition and available on Amazon in both digital and book form. And this is the kind of thing that I cover in this book in detail. Four-wheel drive, my life of four-wheel drive, adventure, travel. And the question today is about diff-locks. Basically, it was phrased like, I know you've said this before and I'm probably asking you to repeat yourself, but when I'm stuck, when do I use the center differential lock and when do I use the rear differential lock? This is a really interesting subject. So he talks about a center differential. The moment he talks about a center differential, you have to assume that the vehicle has an all-wheel drive / full-time four-wheel drive system. In other words, when driving in all conditions, no matter what, there is always drive to both front and back wheels. But it's not locked. With an all-wheel drive car, the transmission, the sensors control the drive and where it goes to. And it will go to a wheel that is spinning. Normally, such a vehicle is actually driving in two-wheel drive. And that same vehicle, if you lift one of the wheels off the ground, doesn't matter which one, it will spin and take all the power. In effect, the vehicle is then stuck. So the center differential prevents that. The center differential says, and that is the main difference between an all-wheel drive and a four-wheel drive, is that the four-wheel drive system is engaged by locking that center differential. With an all-wheel drive system, it needs a differential in the middle because when you're going around corners, the front wheels rotate at different speeds to the back wheels, and that needs a differential to allow the difference in speeds of the drive shafts. If you lock that center differential, it now makes sure that the drive to the front prop shaft and the drive to the rear prop shaft is the same. They're linked. They are locked together, physically locked together. Now, in a vehicle that does not have all-wheel drive or full-time four-wheel drive, but is a four-wheel drive vehicle, there is a lever. And what the lever does is you've got the front prop shaft freely spinning with the wheels and the back prop shaft driving the back wheels through the gearbox. Okay, and what that does is as you push the four-wheel drive lever involved in the cab, it basically takes that front drive shaft, which is free spinning attached to the front axle, and it locks it into place. And now both drive shafts will rotate together. Exactly the same as a full-time four-wheel drive with its center differential locked. It's exactly the same as a part-time four-wheel drive that has been engaged in four-wheel drive. Now, those two vehicles are exactly the same. They have a solid, as if it was solid, drive shaft going from the back axle all the way to the front axle, and in between there's obviously the link with the gearbox, etc. And you have this constant drive. Now, those two prop shafts will rotate at the same speed, no matter what. However, the front and at the back, there's another differential. And the differential is on the axle, and it allows different wheel speeds because as you go round a corner, the wheels on the inside actually rotate slower than the wheels on the outside. In fact, all four wheels do not rotate at the same rate, ever, really. So that's why you need that differential between the front wheels and between the back wheels. Now those two are now open, okay? So as you now drive, you are driving a four-wheel drive vehicle. You've got drive to the front and drive to the back, but you have differentials that allow the vehicle to go around corners easily. Now, quickly, when can I lock that center diff? Or, same thing, remember, engage four-wheel drive. There are no hard and fast rules, but the reason why cars have two-wheel drive and have a center differential is to allow you to drive on a sealed firm surface with the tires gripping well, and there's no scuffing, there's no stress on the transmission when you go around the corners and the wheels try and rotate at different speeds. That's why they exist. Which means you can't just lock the center and just leave it locked, because what's going to happen when you're on a sealed surface? You're going to get transmission wind up, eventually transmission damage, and I say eventually transmission damage, not instantly, but eventually transmission damage, and also it'll affect the handling. The handling will feel a little bit strange, and you might actually hear the scuffing of the tires. Something I used to do when I was young and foolish in the Range Rover. My Range Rover, first four-wheel drive, had lockable, full-time four-wheel drive, lockable center differential, and I go into an underground parking lot with concrete, and as you turn, as you're finally looking for parking, you would hear the tires go, and the tires are scrubbing very slightly. I'd lock the center diff. It would be so loud, and I would do it because the concrete was quite slippery. They would just scuff. But imagine doing that at high speed, where you don't have that smooth surface like the concrete in the underground parking lot. You would actually have a situation where you would rub the rubber off the tires until eventually the transmission would be damaged, as I said. So you have to think carefully about when you can lock it. Now, one of the big problems is, I mustn't lock it because I might damage it. No, there is no, you're wrong. I lock my center differential. I've had many vehicles with full-time four-wheel drive, and I lock that center differential as often as I currently in my Troopy has got part-time four-wheel drive. I engage four-wheel drive, and my highest van has full-time four-wheel drive. Lock the center diff. It's doing the same thing, right? And so what will I do if I'm on a gravel road and it's a bit not really sure-footed in my Troopy? I've locked that. I've engaged four-wheel drive. I've done it already. I've engaged it. With the van, it's exactly the same. I'll lock that center diff when it starts getting a little bit, on a gravel road. And in fact, sometimes, even if it's a smooth gravel road and I'm getting a bit of a pace, I'm going quite fast, I'll lock it. The effect of locking a center differential on a gravel road is that it induces a little bit of understeer. Okay, and what that understeer does is that you will find that the vehicle tracks a little bit better. So if the back breaks away because you've hit a patch of low friction material on the road surface, then instead of the car kind of doing this and you having to make a correction, it'll just go around the corner. You'll hardly notice it. Very important for people that are not skilled at driving on gravel. Lock that center diff / engage four-wheel drive. If the tires have the ability to, in other words, the grip isn't really hard and firm like they would be on an asphalt sealed surface, it's perfectly safe to lock your center differential. Okay, it is safe. You will not damage your transmission. It is incorrect information that you've been given. If somebody has told you you will damage it, you won't. It's designed to do that. As I said, if you leave it locked and you drive it on gravel over a long period of time, eventually you will damage the center transmission. Okay, so that's the center diff lock. Now let's get on to the rear diff lock. Now here, at this point, we can start to discuss it, because in some situations, adding a rear differential lock will actually impede progress over rough ground, not improve it, impede it. Especially when going around tight turns. Now, I've seen this on a beach, on a sandy beach. Now, I'm going to give you a typical example. You drive onto the beach. I'm in four-wheel drive. I was probably in four-wheel drive long before I arrived at the beach on the gravel. But I'm definitely in four-wheel drive if I go onto the beach. Before I go onto the beach, I'm locking that center diff. I'm not going to lock it when I need it. That is a bad driving technique. You lock it because you're thinking to yourself, I could need this any second. And you're not going to get a warning that you're going to need it necessarily. You might suddenly need it, and if you've got it, you get through, and if you don't, your vehicle bogs. Why? Because now with the center locked in four-wheel drive, you need both a front wheel and a back wheel to lose traction simultaneously for the vehicle to bog down. So imagine without a differential lock, one wheel lifts, any one of the four comes off the ground, the vehicle stops. Lock the center differential in or engage four-wheel drive. Now you need two wheels, one on the back and one on the front, must lift simultaneously and lose traction. Now lock that rear differential. Now you will have to lose traction on both back wheels and at least one of the front wheels before the vehicle will stop. But there's a catch here, because you might be thinking, well, that's fantastic. Oh, I do that all the time. No, not necessarily. If you are on a soft sand surface, such as a beach, I don't lock my back diff. I leave it unlocked. And the reason is because you might actually want to turn. Because remember, a differential between the wheels prevents them rotating at different speeds, which means as they try and rotate at different speeds, when you turn, one of them will be rotating at exactly the same speed as the other, but wanting to rotate faster stroke slower. And what it'll do, it'll break traction. It'll actually decrease traction. If I was on a beach, for example, I would definitely lock the center, as I said, get onto the beach, drive around, and now I've got to get off the beach. So here's where things change. Because on the beach, generally speaking, it's fairly flat. If the beach was going to do this and that, I would lock my center diff and my rear diff. Okay, so the rear diff now is as the vehicle is doing this on a slope, you've got less weight on this wheel and more weight on this wheel. So what's going to happen? This wheel with less weight on it is going to want to spin. By locking that rear differential, it won't spin. It'll always rotate at exactly the same speed as that wheel, which is ideal. When you're on flat, you don't need it nearly as much as when you're on a slope. So now getting off the beach, I see it's lumpy. It's lumpy, lock your center rear differential. If it's lumpy, lock your rear diff, because what the wheels are doing is they're going to be lifting, and as they're doing this, there's more weight on that one, then there's more weight on that one, there's more weight on that one, and so they're trying to grab traction. If you can lock them together, they're both rotating at exactly the same speed, no matter what they're doing. You understand the difference? So that rear differential lock thing, and if you drive on a hard surface with a rear differential lock, it'll do two things. Make steering very difficult, and it will quickly damage that differential. So here's something where you do not drive. At speed, on gravel, with a rear differential lock, never. Okay? Not safe, because it affects the steering. And what happens is that it will induce understeer, understeer, understeer. Because remember, the center differential induces a little bit of understeer and keeps it more stable. This is the extreme of that. Understeer, 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 massive oversteer, as both wheels lose traction together, because they're both rotating at exactly the same speed. So if one loses traction, the other one will lose traction. What happens is, suddenly you'll spin the car. All right, so it's really important. That rear lock must come off. Most four-wheel drives have a system where if you have an inbuilt original equipment rear differential lock, if you take it out of low range, it will automatically disengage. And that's why they do this, to prevent you accidentally driving with a rear locker on while driving at speed on gravel. To conclude, I want to talk about the front differential lock. What about a front differential? Because if you've got your center is locked, right, and you've got your rear is locked, and now your front, which are steering wheels, imagine locking those as well. Oh, fantastic. Okay. I have had quite a few vehicles with front lockers, and I have used them. I probably, if I worked hard, could count how many times I've needed them, and I would have room to spare counted on one hand. The reason for it is that the moment you engage that front differential lock, your steering albeit it vanishes. You have almost no steering control at all. So what you'll tend to do, if you know this is really difficult, I don't have to turn, I am going to struggle through this, lock your center, get it locked, go through, keep your steering wheel straight if you can, because if you turn it, you're actually going to slow the progress of the vehicle because the car's not going to turn, it's going to go straight, which means your front wheels are like a plow. So try and keep your wheels straight if you possibly can. You'll have a little bit of steering, little bit, okay? And the moment you don't need it anymore, get rid of that front locker because you'll get your steering back the instant it disengages. Thank you, Mark, again for your question. Really good one. I know it's been answered many, many times. Remember, like and subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, everybody, do me a favor. Reward me by clicking that like button. It's your way of saying, thanks, mate. Nice piece of information. I enjoyed it. Until the next time. The standard of electrical installations in 4x4s, caravan, camper trailers is actually quite poor, and that is because of a lack of expertise and companies doing vehicle builds holding on to that expertise. That is no longer a problem because of the Egon DC hub. It reduces build time, installation time, by over 75%. Difficult to believe, yes, but it's a simple unit that allows all of the batteries, all of the chargers, all of the accessories to be wired into one compact place. No need for a bus bar. And because no lugs, no heat shrink, all you need is a screwdriver. And you wire everything to one compact place. It saves a huge amount of space, and as I said, a huge amount of time. And you will get a first-rate, first-class installation every single time without the need for expertise. You owe it to yourself to go to egon.com.au, look for DC Hub. It will change your build and possibly change your life.